What's your sense of why the Afghan armed forces aren't being able to put up a tougher fight?
Why and how did we come here? Of course, the irresponsible withdrawal of the United States troops and NATO did play a huge role in this. It damaged the morale of our soldiers, as well. It created a vacuum and for our Air Force they have technical problem and they cannot cover the entire country all at once.
One thing I would like to particularly highlight, this is an established armed force, but it's been trained to fight on conventional terms. And the Taliban, which is, to my estimates, about 70,000 strong, and with the give and take something more from the Pakistani side, what we're expecting that there will be more fighters from the Pakistani side, give them about 100,000. They are fighting a completely different pitch. They are fighting guerrilla, they're fighting militants in the militant manner, and the Afghan National Army is obviously trying to fight the conventional way as taught to them.
I think first of all, there's an element of surprise. There's an element of denial that the Americans would leave them so much in the lurch. They are actually not facing a foreign force, at least on the face of it. They are facing Afghans who claim to be Afghan patriots also, and also Muslims. So there are various reasons why, in fact, Afghan soldiers are reacting to this like they would to a kind of Afghan rival. But the real test and the real problem is that the US and the NATO have not really built an Afghan national army. All that they have done is built an Afghan Special Forces counter-terrorist units.
Back in 2002 or 2003, Pakistan was a country which even then suggested to US and other countries to bring the Taliban on board the Bonn process. But our proposal was rejected because even then we thought it made no sense for Afghans to keep fighting among each other and spilling bloodshed.
The Trump administration, or Donald Trump, wanted to get out, and he essentially was looking for political cover to make it easier to effect a withdrawal. And he got that through an agreement that essentially allowed U.S. troops to leave Afghanistan without getting shot at by the Taliban on the way out. It was a very flawed deal. At the time, I thought it was a worthwhile deal to pursue because it was really the only option at that time for there to be any chance of some type of peace process eventually opening up.
Do you believe statistically there is any reason to say this is not the right time for children to go to school?
I think that the right time to open school is now. Rather, we are late in India to open schools. What we need to remember that when we are talking about opening of schools in the country, there are around 175 countries across the world where schools are open either partially or fully. Another point to remember is that there was a period in the pandemic where the cases were rising in some countries, but some of the countries such as Denmark, Netherlands, never closed their school except for a very brief period. By 17 months of pandemic period, we have learned a lot and we know that children are at really low risk.
Last summer, Israel opened its schools. Within 1 week, they had to close the schools because 100% of cases in Israel were traced to the schools. In the United States, since these are federal matters, several states have opened and closed repeatedly, all due to one reason, and that is the spread of the coronavirus. South Korea deferred its opening 5 times.
From our perspective, and if you look at global data, this is the right time to open schools. And this doesn't have a right or a perfect wrong answer, but as a balanced perspective to it. And what you need to consider here is to look at the gaps and the disproportionate consequences that the disadvantaged groups have had in this country of children, especially with child labor in the rural region.
Schools shut last year in March. It was completely without any warning, without any time to prepare for what was going to happen. And so if there is a window right now in which we can come back and plan for eventualities, I think we should take that opportunity.
I think in the times that we're living in, there will never be an ideal time. So tell me, when you ask, is it the right time? When is it the right time? We won't know. Look at the uncertainty of the situation. We're living in those kind of times, so we will never be able to say this is a particular date when we should open.
No, I don't want my children to go to school because I think anxious and worried at this time, because you hear these kind of news like in Ludhiana, Amritsar, children have been infected, and the whole class and the parent and families were also quarantined. And as I hear the news channel here, also I'm finding that Bengaluru and Himachal Pradesh, other states are also finding the cases about children. So it's not about the percentage of children getting infected. As a parent, if my children get infected, so she's very easy in the percentage, right? So I'm really worried on that part.
Why this demand for sanctions against Pakistan, and why now?
The failure to address Pakistan's role in this conflict is the principal cause of over 40 years of war. And I guess most Indians understand Pakistan has relied for far too long on a policy of irregular warfare to pursue its foreign policy interests, and that policy was born in the 70s as to compensate for the loss of East Pakistan, now Bangladesh. It carried on in the 80s with the support of the United States because it became jihad against the Soviet presence in Afghanistan. But since 1989, roughly, Pakistan has been pursuing it more or less alone and at terrible cost to Afghanistan.
I think the Pakistanis have always practiced irregular warfare. They've sponsored terrorists. But the fact is that large and influential Western countries themselves have compromised with the Pakistan. For instance, after 2001 and 2002, there was this basic compromise made between the Americans and the Pakistanis that the Americans will look the other way on the Taliban issue. The Taliban could be given sanctuaries, and in return the Pakistanis would hand over Al-Qaeda operatives.
Even at this stage, the sanctions must be imposed on the Pakistanis. In fact, Pakistanis' role, they are the root of the problem because of which what is happening in Afghanistan. In fact, I would go a step further to say that there's a requirement that diplomatically Pakistan should be isolated in totality.